system for your wedding, birthday or special occasion, then why not get in contact with KTR Records on 07931 152 448 or check out our website on www.ktrrecords.com. We have been in business since 2004 and also undertake community projects. So for your remixes, doublets and all your sound editing needs, why not contact KTR Records, official sponsor of World Jam Global Radio. KTR Records, coming your way.
I was terrified about sharing the vulnerabilities of people with difficulties reading and spelling words. However, I can see the value in sharing, and I have taken the time to make some notes about this in my book, Dyslexic: The Silent Difference. You can get your copy now at www.a1tribe.com or amazon.com or amazon.co.uk. Thank you again, everyone, for your support.
Red Promotions and Highly Blessed Promotions give you Tobago 2020. Tobago 2020, the ultimate carnival experience. Landing on Sunday, 23rd of February 2020. The all-inclusive holiday of a lifetime at an unbeatable price, starting from £1,349 for 7 nights, all-inclusive, with 10 nights optional. There will be fun-filled day and night events like the popular all-white party, pool party, barbecue boat ride, plus the carnival experience and much more. Music by some of London's finest: Courtney Melody, Commander B, D-Mac, TC Fords, DJ Matt and Euro Millions and more. So join us and let's live our best lives. For general inquiries, call 07729 190 026. For booking and more info, call SN Travel on 0207 254 0136. Quoting Tobago 2020. Sponsored by VibesFM.net, MrMighty.co.uk, SN Travel and
World Jam Global.
Do you like music like this?
Great music all the time.
Or like this?
The music you love.
Maybe this.
Great music that makes you want to turn up the volume loud.
Or life track like this.
Especially where human life is concerned. Surely, sooner or later, people will realize that lives actually matter.
Then you're in the right place. Keep it locked to World Jam Global, where music is harmony.
Music 24 hours a day, 365 days a year.
Yeah, my World Jam. Hotter than them.
See live schedule.
World Jam Global Radio. This is clarity.
So we got a change to the scheduled show this afternoon, this evening.
I did my time. I paid for my crime.
We should have had Veda Washington, the auntie of Alton Sterling,
For my crime.
our live guest. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties beyond our control, we have not been able to get Veda to appear live. We've been working with her right up until the final moments. Still wasn't able to get her connected.
For my crime.
So the roundtable team, we got together. We had a conversation and we decided that we were going to try and go on with the show the best way that we could. We're going to do a roundup, a recap of what we did on the first show. If you remember, Veda appeared just a few weeks ago in the middle of a hurricane, by all things.
Very quick on my feet.
And we managed to hold on to her for an hour before we lost connection with her.
Getting money, life is so sweet.
But there's also some recent developments that we're also going to be able to review.
Rearrange. I'm a changed man. Don't need no gun in my hand.
And then we're going to look at what the difference is between
It's too short to spit.
the UK and the USA
Trying to cope.
as the roundtable team interrogate me. My gosh.
My crime.
My name is Kervin Julien. It's Issues Today, live on World Jam Global Radio. And we'll be with you live in just a few short moments.
Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent. I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb.
Please use this opportunity to share this live stream to all your groups and friends.
The real Terminator,
This, by the way, is my very last week of being banned on Facebook jail.
all you haters.
I'll be back next week in full effect, able to post to all groups, comment. My gosh, 5 months. ISIS terrorists don't get banned for that long. Boy, the truth hurts.
My time.
You can get us live on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can catch us live on YouTube. You can catch us live on Twitter. And you can catch me live on Facebook.
Did my time. Pay for my crime. Already did.
The stream has been cut short as far as the World Jam Global Radio Facebook and the Issues Today Facebook is concerned, because I actually cannot share on them. Not until next week.
Pay for my crime. Already did my time.
But we send our apologies. We should have had Veda Washington, the aunt of Alton Sterling, on today's show.
And have the right to vote.
We are going to continue with that discussion, but unfortunately, due to technical difficulties beyond hers and our control, we've not been able to connect with Veda in time for this live stream and podcast.
I'm very quick on my feet. I was swift.
But we do have D. Martin,
all over the street.
Scott Russian,
Getting money, life is so sweet.
Therese Gallagher, Yolanda McNair,
Game is fitting real.
Patrick Lane, and Stephanie Babb.
Don't need no gun in my hand. It ain't about being no gangster. Life is too short to spend it all.
This was such a big story that we wanted to cover that the entire roundtable team volunteered to come and support Veda on this particular show.
Already.
And I feel it's important that we honor that and try and do Alton justice.
I pay for my crime.
Justice for Alton Sterling, we say.
Already did my time. I pay for my crime. Already did my time. I paid for my crime. I was a drug dealer, sold more drugs than Superfly, but I never got high on my own supply. I'm not proud of what I had to do. That's why I'm telling my story to you and you. I had to repent, I must admit, I was doing all kind of stupid shit. Now sit back and think it over since I've gotten older. The life I used to live, I wouldn't do it again. I was young and dumb, my brain was so numb. I was a real...
but
I was nobody's chump.
Sometimes we allow ourselves to get distracted, my friends.
I was the real...
Please don't forget to join me for tomorrow morning's Church Before Church.
I'd chew you up and spit you out like a real alligator.
I want to say a big shout out to my dear friend, Mr. Michael J. Calhoun.
Pay for my crime.
You'll see him on the Rock Walk of Fame.
I paid for my crime.
Found a member of the Daz Band and a great supporter of Dr. Feelgood and Church Before Church. I'll be playing a brand new track from him tomorrow morning also. But for today, my friends, it's Issues Today live on World Jam Global Radio. My name is Kervin Julien. And the theme of today's show is when killing appears to be the only option. Our very own producer TJ is not feeling too well. She's got a terrible chest, cough, throat. She's banned from the microphone. We've banned her. She's not allowed to talk. But she's about producing, prompting, finding information for us, etc.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
Stephanie Babb is not too well, so she's also in the wings.
This day, a daily break.
And as usual, we're always waiting for Patrick Lane to turn up.
So trust me.
Today he's super late. But we do have D. Martin, Scott Russian, and Yolanda McNair.
Kingdom.
And we will try and take this thing apart.
And ever. Amen. Paper my crown, paper my crown, paper my crown, paper my crown. Paper my crown. All those drive-by killings, stop them. It ain't about nothing. He who was out sin, let him cast the first stone. I'm trying to get this felony off my back so I can get my life on track and have the right to vote and live like an ordinary citizen again. This is my message to all of my friends in the pen, statewide, worldwide, and put down those knives, stop stabbing each other. Yeah.
Well, is there a big shout out going out to each and every single one of you, whatever the part of the world you may be, wherever you're from. My name is Kervin Julien. This is Issues Today live on World Jam Global Radio.
In the last 90 days.
So, we were supposed to have Veda Washington live. She was supposed to be doing the follow-up to the Alton Sterling story, when killing appears to be the only option. If you remember correctly, a few weeks ago, she appeared on this show, and it was in the middle of a hurricane where she was. And eventually, the weather just got the better of her connection, and she wasn't able to continue. And I think we managed to hold on to her for around about an hour before we lost her. But no, we were supposed to have her on again today as the follow-up, but unfortunately, technical difficulties beyond hers and our control meant that we were unable to get a connection prior to us coming live on air this evening, this afternoon, whatever your time zone is. It's evening here in the UK, 11 minutes past 6. And once we sat down with the team, in fact, almost every member, apart from Jerry Summers, who's in the middle of a building project, made themselves available to support Veda on this particular show. And so we put a vote out to decide what we were going to do. Do we feel that we can actually do the Alton Sterling story justice without Veda? Maybe not, but I do think that there are some avenues that we can investigate based on what we already know, what was divulged recently, and some other aspects that we're looking to. So if you just bear with us, the first part of the show we're going to recap. Second part of the show we're going to bring up some new information and dissect that. And the third part of the show, as suggested by Scott Russian, we're going to look at the comparisons between policing here in the UK and policing in USA, some of the resources that are used, the strategies that are used, and whether or not one or the other can do better by using options that are available in other countries, for example. So I think this is going to be a really interesting show. And at some point, if Patrick Lane does turn up, we'll bring him in. TJ, our beloved producer, has been really under the weather for the last few weeks, as we all know. She's still not too well, and the last couple of days she's actually had an absolutely bad throat, sore throat, and in fact she can hardly speak. So she's on a ban from talking on here today. So you won't hear her voice, but she will be prompted by us, or we will be prompted by her. And she'll be keeping an eye on things and keeping this particular show on track. I do believe that Dee is not too well either, but she's soldiering on. She's got a bit of a temperature, and I think she's getting some advice even now as we speak in order to bring that. I want to say a big good evening going out to Marquis Martin. I see you, sir. Tash Keys, good evening to you as well. Christine Lee Rose, I also see you. Thank you for joining us. Deborah Sanchez, it's her first time watching the show. She's going to be a guest on the show next week. Pablo Lima, my dear friend from Cardiff, South Wales. Holly Edwards, we've had her on the show before now. And Josephine Pisculi. I want to say a big shout out just to those people for now. No matter where you're from, if you're tuning in, this is Issues Today live on World Jam Global Radio. My name is Kervin Julien. You can follow us live on www.worldjamglobalradio.com. You can catch us live on Facebook. You can catch us live on Twitter. You can catch us live on YouTube. And obviously on the website, www.worldjamglobalradio.com. I do believe we're also live on TuneIn, on every multimedia platform. And we look forward to having you with us for the rest of this evening's show. Okay, so without any further ado, we'll just take our time bit by bit as we introduce the guests that are going to be supporting today, and just hear a little bit about them before we start to talk about the reason why we are here on today's show. So first, let me just introduce Scott Russian. How are we doing, Scott?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Scott.
Oh, good. Well, I feel guilty because I'm not sick. I feel good. Everybody else,
I don't feel guilty because I'm not sick.
Okay.
I don't feel guilty at all.
And I feel good, and I do feel outraged. Sorry Veda can't make it. But since Veda was on our last show, I've spent some time reading about the case and watching different YouTubes, watching the body-worn cameras, watching the security camera, which was quite a different angle on Alton's killing, asking a few questions of family. He did have sort of multiple families, a little unusual situation, but the way I see it, Kervin, and maybe Veda and the family are listening in, and some of the members, but it's just a guy trying to make a few bucks, out and just trying to make a few bucks. I mean, he's not on welfare and he's not begging. I mean, he's just working, and he's at a place where he obviously had a good relationship with the store owner, because I think we've learned the store owner, got along with Alton, and even
Alton was there for 11 years.
Yeah, so they must have been buddies.
Absolutely, that had been his pitch for 11 years. So it wasn't even a case of Alton just turned up and tried to sell on a street corner. He paid for a pitch. He had a relationship with the store owner, and the store owner permitted him, allowed him to, gave him permission to operate from outside his store. Yes. And remember, just before you carry on, remember we asked, and we'll probably go into this later in the show again, because I did challenge this when Veda was on here the last time. If he was of a dangerous entity, no other shops along there would have sided with this particular store owner in having him outside his store, because he would have been a negative influence and impact to their store.
Yes.
So somebody would have raised an objection. So carry on. Sorry, Scott.
Yes, so absolutely. I mean, that's just one of the facts. The way I've now analyzed these cases, Kervin and Yolanda and Dee can probably agree with me that you have to think like the lawyer when you're a family member. Even though you cry, you want justice, you really have to switch your mind into that of a lawyer. And there's facts. Every case, like Alton's, there's facts, there's material facts, and then there's disputed facts and undisputed facts. And it's a very narrow channel in the United States of getting your evidence. And I'm looking at these films and I'm thinking, what are facts and what are disputed facts? Yeah. And what's undisputed is what you just said. For example, it's undisputed that Alton was not, doing his business against the wishes of the store owner. That's undisputed. It's undisputed that the police officers approached Alton in a very aggressive manner and said something like, I probably got this wrong, like, hold still, bitch, or I'm going to shoot you, or something like that. And they held the gun right at Alton's head. And you can see him going, what did I do? What did I do? I mean, and that's what anybody would do. If an officer pulls a gun on you and points it at you, the first thing you're going to say is, what did I do, officer? I mean, that's just a normal reaction. Well, these guys, basically what we call bum rushed, that means like tackled Alton. They bum rushed him out of nowhere. And that's an undisputed fact. But a disputed fact, for example, that I caught in one of the tapes, Kervin, was that someone called 911. Somebody, unidentified, anonymous, called 911 and said there's a man out in front of the store. I forget the name of the store where Alton was killed, but who's got a gun in his pocket. He's got a gun. And Officer Salamoni and Officer Lake were responding to a black man with a gun out in front of the store. Now, what's really disturbing to me is that was an anonymous call, Kervin. It was an anonymous call. So somebody, that could have been a prank. That could have been somebody who's mad at Alton. That could have been somebody, a competitor. I mean, we don't know. But the police took that call, black man with gun in front of store, and you see the undisputed fact that he was killed in a very violent manner.
We're gonna really tear that piece of evidence apart in this show, because it's an area that I want to go into, and there's several reasons. There's several reasons why
Call
but there's two
really
things.
Sticks out.
Two things about that, Scott. One, it's an anonymous call, but later on in one of the police statements, they actually identify him as a homeless man.
Well, even worse then. Even
right?
worse.
So here you have an anonymous call on one report, and on another report, you've got a homeless man that cannot be traced.
Absolutely.
Right?
An unreliable caller who might not even have the right guy.
But the response and the reaction of the police, as if they were given a hot tip.
Correct.
Which doesn't correspond. Which doesn't correspond with their very own version of how they managed to come across this information. Sorry, was that you, Dean? Come on.
Yeah, and my question too, because I am 1,000% against relying on the information that they give, because we know 80 to 90% of it is tainted. Was there any records that the family got a chance to listen to that tip call? Or did the call even exist?
So these are some of the things that we don't know, and I think I asked that question in the last show, because we have no evidence that the anonymous call ever came in, and we have no evidence that the homeless man who eventually is claimed in another report as the man that gave that report, because they were claiming that he was asking Alton for money and he was annoying Alton, which is why Alton pulled out the gun on him. Right, but this person has never been able to materialize. So there's no verification that this series of events actually took place. Right.
Well, we all know it's a lie.
Okay.
Let's face it. We all know that's a lie.
So you can't have an anonymous tip and a homeless guy. You can't have that. It's one or the other. It can't be both.
And if he's homeless, does he have a cell phone? Is this a lifeline phone? Did he call from a payphone? Either way.
And if he called from a payphone, where did he get the money from? Because if he's homeless, he got no money. And I'm sorry to stereotype, but I know I have a homeless ministry. I serve homeless people every week. And believe you me, the one thing that they're always asking you for is money. And the other thing that they'll ask you for is, can they use your phone? Can they use your phone because they want to phone somebody, or some of them just want to phone for drugs. I won't let them use my phone. Others want to phone a family member, etc. Can I use your phone? So let's just bear in mind.
I have yet an operative payphone on the street that's not damaged in a sort of way to be able to even place the call. So that raises a big flag for me. So in my opinion, I don't even think there was a call.
Yeah, I agree.
So thank you for that, Scott. Dee, you want to just introduce yourself for a little bit, and then we'll go to Yolanda, and then hopefully we'll start to look into this story a bit more.
Oh, my name is Dee Martin. I'm sister of Andre Gladden, who was murdered in Portland, Oregon, on January 6th of last year. So it's come on the almost a year and some change, angelversary for him. The family's still fighting for justice. It's not as many as I'd like, but definitely platforms like this make his story more aware to the public, and trying to get the family some support in doing that. So thankfully, I have been on the round table for quite some time, so the team is a super support, and thank God for the platform.
Thank you very much, Dee. I don't know if Yolanda's back. I know she went to go and get a drink. Are you back, Yolanda?
I'm back.
Okay. So just introduce Mama Curtsy, Mama of the house. Just introduce yourself, and then.
Okay. Well, I'm Yolanda McNair, mother of Adacia Miller. Um, my daughter was killed one day before her 25th birthday in July of 2012. Um, I've met many a parent that was going through the same thing, fighting with the law about what the law is supposed to do. I created an organization called Protect Our Stolen Treasures, affectionately known as POST. And we have multiple chapters in multiple states. And the one thing that we don't do is back down from the law.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, TJ, we decided that we wasn't going to let you talk. So TJ is my producer. She's been producing me for over a year now. And her son Travis was also killed by police. Was it 11 years ago? Something like that, wasn't it? 15 years ago. And
TJ.
And she has been a great stalwart, a supporter for many families and individuals who have gone through something like this. And she is my right hand, my producer on Issues Today. But she's banned from talking. And even at 15, she just shouted out. She should have typed in. She's already been ordered. So let's just make sure that she keeps to her order. Okay. At 12:35 a.m. at 2112 North Foster Drive in the parking lot of Triple S Food Mart, Sterling was detained by Baton Rouge Police Department officers Blaine Salamone and Howie Lake. This came after an anonymous caller reported that a man was threatening him and waving a handgun while in the process of selling CDs. The officers tasered Sterling for resisting several times, then forced Sterling to the hood of a sedan and then to the ground. Sterling was pinned to the ground by both officers, one kneeling on his chest and the other on his thigh, both attempting to control his arms. Salamone exclaimed, "He's going into his pockets. He's got a gun. Gun!" Lake, pointing his gun, yelled, "Hey bro, if you effing move, I swear to God." Then Salamone was heard on the video saying, "Lake, he's going for the gun." The camera caught Salamone firing 3 shots, panning away while 3 more shots were fired before panning back to show Sterling's body sprawled out. Lake was not in the picture and Salamone was about 3 feet, 0.9 meters away, with his gun drawn and pointed at Sterling, who had a gunshot wound in his chest. Sterling was shot a total of 6 times, all within close range, and we found out yesterday that everything happened in 71 seconds. The officers retrieved a loaded .38 caliber revolver from Sterling's front pants pocket. The officers then radioed for emergency medical services. I need to stop there for a minute because I'm 100% sure that the police in their statement said that they retrieved the gun that Sterling had from the car.
That's right.
Am I missing something here?
Right.
Have I actually missed something? Or because I'm positive in the police statement they retrieved the gun from the car, but here it says the officers retrieved a loaded .38 caliber revolver from Sterling's front pants pocket.
Yeah.
Okay.
That wasn't the story that Veda told us.
He died to multiple gunshot wounds. Sorry. One second. Multiple bystanders' cell phones captured videos of the shooting as well as store surveillance cameras and officer body cameras. One of the bystanders' videos was filmed by a group called Stop the Killing, which listens to police scanners and films crimes in progress. They also listen to police interactions in an effort to reduce violence in the community. A second video was made available the day after the shooting by the store owner and eyewitnesses, who said in a statement to NBC News, Sterling never wielded the gun or threatened the officers. Clearly, that's the store owner. And in March 2018, the body cam footage from the officer who shot him was released, revealing that seconds after arriving to help the other officer already engaged in trying to detain Sterling, he pulled his guns and threatened to shoot Sterling if he moved. Now, this casts a totally different picture to the one that law enforcement are trying to get you to believe with this forced Sterling onto the hood of the sedan and then to the ground. Sterling was pinned to the ground by both officers, one kneeling on his chest, the other on his thigh, both attempting to control his arm. You got to remember that FBI put the, and this is from the latest video that we've had and we've been looking at, and this is the one that we'll be talking about later in the show, right? That from beginning to end was 71 seconds. That's a minute and a half. A minute and a half of arriving on the scene. Sterling lies sprawled and dead on the pavement.
That's less than a minute and a half, you know. And this guy comes in.
Sorry, it is. Yeah, it's a minute and 10 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, and he's engaging violently from the get-go. He doesn't know what the other officer has said or done, any kind of transition that's gone on between the two of them. He just comes in, damn near guns a-blazing.
Now, here's the thing.
Right.
Most of the concerns are not raised on both officers, not even on the whole police force. All of the concerns are raised with one officer, Salamoni. Talk to us about Salamoni, Scott.
Well, I would just piggyback on what Yolanda said. Getting back to what we were talking about earlier, first of all, if the 911 call was made, and I don't believe it was, I believe that was a crafted story by the district attorney to help justify Salamoni's actions when he arrived. First of all, it's not a good justification. You know, you can see by the look on Alton Sterling's face from all the cameras, he's just shocked that he's being approached by peace officers. You know what I mean by that? Which I mean violence officers, but I'm calling them peace officers. They show up. This guy's doing what he's done for years. He looks stunned. He looks absolutely in shock. And Salamoni's, you know, using profanity, got the gun at his face, and it's that bum rush, overreaction, trigger happy, cop personality, rogue cop. We have seen it now. How many dozens of times have we now seen that just on this roundtable? And we're a small group, and we see it again and again and again. And what is so disturbing is that the system at the end of where we are now is nowhere. These officers, I guess Salamoni was allowed to retire, so I assume he gets some kind of pension or something. That I'm not sure, but he wasn't fired. The other officer, Lake, is still on the job. But what's so disturbing, and there's similarities in the killing of Alton Sterling to Desmond Phillips, who brought me to you guys, and Tyler Rushing, my son. You know, the officers bum rushed Tyler, and he was in a bathroom with no place to go, in my case, and it was less than 2 minutes between the time they broke into the bathroom to the time my son had a bullet through his throat and the back of his head. Less than 60 seconds. And that's, you know, Alton 71 seconds, Tyler 100 seconds. I mean, is that police work? Is that crime fighting? Of course not. And
I'm not even sure if hitmen and assassinators actually get their kills off that quickly.
Yeah, well, and the reason is, Kervin, is they know they're going to get backed up. Alton Sterling, the officers that killed Tyler, they're going to get backed up by the system. Let me
just interject. I'm going to interject. I want you guys to listen to this very carefully, okay? Because you said that he wasn't even fired. He was allowed to retire. So here's the thing, right? Baton Rouge officials announced this week that the city has reached a settlement with Blaine Salamoni, a former officer in its police department who fatally shot Alton Sterling in 2016. The shooting, captured on cell phone video, added Sterling to a long list of recognizable names of people who have died at the hands of police. After lengthy reviews of the case, state and federal officials declined to prosecute Salamoni in Sterling's death, and in March 2018, the officer was fired from the Baton Rouge Police Department by its newly hired chief, Murphy Paul. But Salamoni appealed to a local civil service board, and this week the city settled, agreeing to retract his firing and retroactively allow him to resign without compensation or back pay. Right. Now, that's that. I want you to hear what the incoming police chief had to say about Salamoni when he came, right? Which is what was resulting in him being fired before he appealed and had it retracted, right? So Baton Rouge, I did share this with you guys on the first show, but I'm happy to share it again. Baton Rouge Police Chief Murphy Paul apologized on behalf of the department for hiring the officer who killed Alton Sterling, the 37-year-old black man whose July 2016 death spurred protests as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. We are sorry, again, this is Police Chief Murphy Paul. We are sorry, Baton Rouge. I want to apologize to the family of Alton Sterling and also to his kids, Chief Pauling said, according to CNN affiliate WAFB. Watch this. We're sorry. That's a third one, right? We're sorry because he should have never been hired. And while we obviously cannot change the past, it is clear that we must change the future. And I sincerely apologize, there's another sorry for you, for the actions of the past and the role of our profession has played in building barriers in communities of color in Baton Rouge, said Paul, who joined the department in January 2018. In March 2018, 2 months after he joined, state officials decided not to file criminal charges against the two officers involved in Sterling's fatal shooting, saying their actions were justified. But days later, police fired Officer Blaine Salamoni for violating use of force policies when he shot Sterling. Salamoni had appealed his firing, but Paul announced Thursday that they reached a resolution that would keep Salamoni from ever working with the department. Mayor Sharon Weston Broom said Salamoni will not receive monetary compensation in the resolution. Now, you don't throw your guy under the bus if you're backing him, right? 4 occasions, Police Chief Murphy Paul says that he is sorry. He is sorry. He says Salamoni should have never been hired. The community never should have been subjected to his violence. And we are also, we've also got to find out that he actually has a history of violent, aggressive confrontations. Alton Sterling wasn't the only one. Now, let's go back, shall we? Let's go back at 12:35 a.m. at 2112 North Foster Drive in the parking lot of Triple S Food Mart, where Sterling was detained by Baton Rouge Police Department officers, Blaine Salamoni and Howie Lake. This came after an anonymous caller reported that a man was threatening him and waving a handgun while in the process of selling CDs. Let's stop there for a moment, shall we? Yolanda, when we hear this commentary of the incoming chief of police, Murphy Paul, who apologizes 4 times in a very short statement that he makes. This introduction we have to the officers arriving on the scene differs from what's witnessed on the actual video footage, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I'm actually looking at the video footage from one of the officers now, and I put on the closed caption so I make sure I'm catching everything. And once they attempted to get their gloves on to try to administer any kind of aid to Alton, which we know they wasn't really going to do anything, one of the officers says, "Oh, fuck it, just let him fucking be, stupid ass motherfucker.
Right. In those words. Yeah, you're not
exactly those words. I mean, I could screenshot it. Oh, fuck it, just let them fucking be.
It just shows you peace.
The lack of regard that they have for human life. That's what it shows you.
Wow.
Right.
They don't even care that cameras are rolling and the audio is on. They have no regard for life.
Right. Wait a minute. It's not even that they don't have any regard for life. It's that they have no fear of repercussion.
And in that context of that language.
Because there are none, typically.
Right.
In the contents of that language, in their reaction to somebody who's bleeding out to death, that's a total disregard of his well-being and a neglection and abolition of their duty.
Right. That totally goes against what they've sworn an oath to do. And then it's just showing you that they don't consider him to be a human being of any value or any worth. I mean, he's laying there bleeding out through his chest with 6 wounds to his chest, close range. We already know he already dead. But you're going to say, stupid ass motherfucker. Like he did something wrong.
It's shocking.
That was premeditated murder via cop. He already said he was going to kill him. 41 seconds later, he did.
He does.
And I want to hold. I want to hold fire on the second video just for a moment, because we really want to rip that apart in the second segment of this show. I just want to focus on that introduction. So let's just bearing in mind. Let's bear in mind what we're talking about here. Supposedly, somebody makes an anonymous call to say that there's somebody outside a shop with a gun. And it's one of the reasons why I would have really loved to have had Jerry Summers here, because if I'm reenacting this scenario, right, I just want to paint some pictures for you guys to just follow me for a moment with your mind, with your mind's eye. Follow me for a moment, right? So an anonymous caller has made a call, whether it's in a phone box or a mobile phone, who's borrowed somebody's phone. We're going to go with this, right? We're taking their version of events as gospel at the moment, right? So this anonymous caller has been, confronted by Alton. Alton has waved a gun at him. The guy's gone off, oh, I'm scared, and found a phone, borrowed a phone, found 10 cents on the floor and used a payphone, whatever he did, but he called 911 and told them that there's a guy outside the shop waving a gun. And so dispatch send out these officers. They send out these officers with the report that there was a guy waving a gun outside the shop. Right. So the officers arrive on the scene. Bearing in mind, there are 2 different reports. One says that the officers found a gun in the car. That's their own statement, by the way. The police officers' very own statement. In fact, if I'm correct, that was Howe's statement, not Salomone's. It was Howe's statement. Howe said in his statement that they found the gun in the car, right? And then, was the claim not that he threw it into the car? He had thrown it into the car as he was falling down or something? I don't know. Something like that, right? Here's the thing. And an anonymous phone call is given that there's somebody waving a gun. They send the officers out. The officers arrive on scene. They arrive on scene, but let me paint this picture for you. When they arrive, they find a guy standing outside a stall selling CDs. There are no guns present. There is no altercation taking place. No one's in the middle of having a row. No one's got a gun in anybody else's face. There's no people standing around going, it's him, he's the guy that's got the gun. But yet, they determine, without any provocation, any prompting, any identification, or any eyewitness saying that's the guy, they go for Alton Sterling. From the moment they arrive till the moment he lays dead on the ground, there are 71 seconds at play. 71 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. 71 seconds for them to have arrived, determined that Alton Sterling was some sort of mad maniac that needed manhandling. When you clearly hear him say on the video, what I forget what his exact words were. What were they, Yolanda?
The part about him saying, "I'm gonna kill you, bitch," when he put the gun to his head.
Yeah,
or...
what Alton said. I think he said something like, "What do you want? What are you doing, man?"
Yeah. You know,
what you doing, man?
What did I do?
Yeah, what did I do? That's what he said. What did I do? 71 seconds. Now, I'm asking you, what could Alton have possibly done in 71 seconds that could have justified such a violent, aggressive approach to manhandling him on the car bonnet onto the floor and then shooting him 6 times? Bearing in mind, they're very clever with words. He was shot 3 times, and then he was shot a further 3 times. So the number 3 sticks in your mind. But let me tell you something. It was 6 shots. 3 shots twice. What does that tell you, Scott?
It's just trigger happy. I mean, I just fall back to everything we know. Just trigger happy cops, emboldened. Kervin, they are so emboldened that, as I think Yolanda said, even with the cameras on, they just don't care. It shows that body-worn cameras, which are helpful, are not going to stop officers killing civilians. It's not going to stop them.
No.
This is an example of that, and that's another story, body-worn cameras. Turning them off and on, being edited and clipped by the authorities. They hold these videos for months while they get a good chance to, have their producers and their technicians, cut and clip and in effect kind of scrub the videos. That's why cell phone video, security camera video is so important, because it often shows a different story. But yeah, my first reaction is just unfrickin' believable. The course of action nationwide in this kind of a case, in my opinion, Kervin, if someone makes a 911 call, okay, number one, that should be kind of vetted by the dispatch first, and make sure it's a valid 911 call, not some kind of a prank, or there's another word for that where somebody makes a 911. I can't think of it, but when the officer showed up, all you really need to do was engage in a conversation with Alton. Like, hey, Alton, somebody called and said you were waving a gun.
So sorry, Scott, the term that you're looking for is called swatting.
Yeah, swatting. Okay. So is it a SWAT, which is a real issue? It's pranking, swatting. That would be my first reaction. Now it's become a thing. Let's say an ex-husband wants to swat his ex-wife and her new boyfriend, So an anonymous 911, for example, call comes in and says, hey, there's a violent domestic dispute going on at, 123 First Street, Yeah. And the cops they kick the door open and they, shoot the guy and his, the ex-girlfriend. I mean, you could see that happening with SWATs and with swatting and with prank calls. But crime fighting, to me, and Jerry Summers will tell you this, and so will Seth Stoughton and Norm Stamper and other professionals, experienced professionals that we've talked with, that about 99% of police work is talking, is communicating. And about 1% is action of some sort. And that doesn't mean guns. That might mean tasing. That might mean wrestling. That might mean using your baton. That doesn't mean pulling out your gun or your AK-47 or your AR-15 and blasting away. So 99% of law enforcement is communication. But guess what, Kervin? In our training academies across the country and in our departments across the country, the training is about use of force, use of weapons, chokeholds, all of these different tools. So it's backwards. The training is shown here by Salamone. Not only that, Salamone clearly has mental issues, and the department really, there's some hint that he was mentally unbalanced, that Salamone was a dangerous police officer to the public, and yet they didn't.
Mute your mic, Patrick. Mute your mic.
I don't know what that's well. I'm just dumbfounded that. I
just want to go back to that intro, and please forgive me if I'm being ignorant or naive. I wouldn't like to think that is of me, but let's go back to the intro. An anonymous caller calls in to say that there's a man waving a gun outside the shop. When the police arrive, there is no man waving a gun outside the shop. So my question still is, what caused them to make such an aggressive and violent approach to an individual that was showing no arms, was showing no aggression, was showing no violence, was not being confrontational, and was stood there doing what he did each and every week, which was sell his CDs. What I'm trying to ascertain, what I'm trying to understand here, is what triggered the violent approach that led to 6 shots being fired and an individual laying dead on the ground 71 seconds later. And we can skip over and gloss over all of this nonsense if we like, but I just want to go back to this opening to try and let's unravel the kind of attitude and mentality of approach. Because what I'm trying to say here is, surely the approach should have been, we've had a report of somebody waving a gun around here. And Alton Sterling being the only one there, they could have turned around and said, have you seen anything? Or the person was fitting your description. But there's none of this. They've got an anonymous call saying that a man was waving a gun. They don't understand why the gun was being waved. They don't have no knowledge of what was taking place, because you do have the right to carry arms. Right, so it could have been a case of somebody defending themselves while they're about to be robbed. That could have been possible. But there is no attempt by the officers to try and understand what type of call they were responding to, and looking at the circumstances and the situation that they had walked into, and being able to determine that there is no imminent threat. No imminent threat allows them to ask some questions. Have you been here all afternoon, sir? Yes. Did you see a man waving a gun? No. Okay, we're going to have to talk to you because we've had a report that somebody was waving a gun. So can you just stay there a minute? Call the store owner out. We've had a report. Did you see anything? Right? Maybe even at that moment in time, they could have detained him or just asked him to wait for a moment while they asked the store owner to rewind his CCTV for 20 minutes and have a look and see what this confrontation outside the store was. There's so many different options that they could have had as a detective, as a police officer, as an investigator, somebody trying to get to the bottom of this thing. Because if somebody's making an anonymous call that somebody is waving a gun around here, that could have some serious consequences here. Surely you want to be sure.
At the same point, nobody's in their right mind. Someone who is waving a gun frantically or trying to attack another individual, they're not going to stick around to wait for the trouble to come had that been the situation.
Absolutely.
So, in hindsight, the moment that officer stepped out of the car, it was over before it started, because for the simple fact he would, invite himself into Sterling's space in an aggressive manner with a threat ending his life. And for that to happen later, it was over before it began. Now, what you're stating, what should have happened, and if we're going to throw out the reasonable, officer, that would have been a reasonable officer's approach. Yeah. But this guy, based on the history that we know from this officer, he should have never been on the force. For all we know, this has to be some type of history, the attitude, the mannerism, what he does is not some of a person that should have been on the force in general. And with all the several apologies, that's acceptance of fault. They know that had he not been on the force, this wouldn't have happened. So what's his relationship with his wife? What was the previous call? What was the previous day? What did the previous day hold for him? What had him in that mind state? He's a fucking lunatic.
Right.
Excuse my language.
That's just proving that they know that they dropped the ball when it came to vetting this officer in the first place.
Exactly.
And somebody glossed over stuff that they saw. I tell my kids and my grandkids all the time, it only takes 2 seconds to think. And this officer came out knowing that he was going to kill him regardless if he was the man that they were supposedly after or not. It didn't make a decision. It didn't make a difference. He had already made that conscious decision. He was going to end the officer's life, period. For the
we to say, because of the actions of this officer, that the actual killer, the actual person who was waving the gun, didn't initially get away. How do we know that? If Sterling wasn't the guy, how do we know that based on the cop's behavior and the way that he approached, caused the actual person to flee and get away with what he did?
Here's the
Either
thing.
way, they killed an innocent man.
We actually talked about right at the beginning the approach, and that's why I wanted to get round, right? Based on the call, an anonymous call, the attitude and mentality, and you're quite right, Dee, when you say that from the time the officers got out of their car, Sterling was already dead, because the mentality, the attitude, the mindset of those officers was never to engage in a friendly conversation. Here's the thing. Leo Hamilton, an attorney for the Baton Rouge Police Department, said Thursday that Salamoni had a history of misbehavior prior to Sterling's shooting. This is the attorney for the Baton Rouge Police Department. This is not Alton Sterling's family lawyers. This is the attorney for the Baton Rouge Police Department. He says Salamoni had a history of misbehavior prior to Sterling's shooting. What became apparent from all the evidence presented to the chief was that Mr. Salamoni had a propensity for acting outside of the standards established by the BRPD for command of temper and use of force. Hamilton said Salamoni regularly shouted profanities and abused individuals with unnecessary uses of force, as he did in the Sterling incident. Salamoni's ill temperament caused blow-ups with other officers, including one with a ranking officer. Hamilton said another officer told their superior that if something weren't done about Salamoni, he could kill somebody. And he did.
And he did.
And he did. There was no attempt to detain, restrain, withhold, or capture him.
Investigate crime fighting.
So my question would be, how many fractions on this man's record do they allow him to get away with before this happens?
And this is why the police department are just as accountable as he is, because with this knowledge available to them on their database, right, they still gave him a badge and a gun and let him loose. Pointless saying now he's got a history of this kind of behavior. He got a history of this kind of behavior. Why haven't you disciplined him? Why hasn't something been done about this?
Well, my theory, Kervin, is that the departments don't want to stop that behavior. It's sad, but it's kind of a modern day lynching, the way I see it, is they can send out these officers in uniform protected by qualified immunity, and they can shoot black people and get away with it. And that's my simple take on it.
I just want to bring in Patrick a moment. Sorry, Patrick. I know you've been out rushing about and you woke up late. Your alarm didn't go off. It's great to have you on board. I knew you was really looking forward to this show. But with your knowledge and experience of Black and American history, the way that these officers approached Alton Sterling, is it just not reminiscent of all of these sad stories that we continue to hear right across the states?
It absolutely is. And I think that Scott Rushing just nailed it. And that's what I've been thinking about so much this past couple of weeks is there a culling? I mean, I think this is a question that we really need to start asking. Is there a culling of our society going on? And are the police being used to enact that culling of black and brown people? When I think of Mr. Sterling, that was such a violation of his civil rights. And there are countless other Alton Sterlings out there. I think that at some point that we need to start discussing, at least start the discussion, that there is something very wicked going on in America. And you know what? It's really, when I say America, it's really, there's this type of authoritarianism that is threatening to sweep our planet. It's in UK, it's in Germany, it's rearing its ugly head here in America, where we never thought we'd see it, but we're starting to see this all over the world, and we're seeing groups targeted. And I feel like that black and brown people, although police are killing everybody, but disproportionately black and brown men are killed, that we need to start having this discussion of what is really going on. Like Scott said, they don't seem to want to stop. They don't seem to be able to stop. Whether they have cameras on or cameras off, they're still killing folks. So I think this is a discussion. I'm so glad that Scott brought it up, being a white brother, brought it up and voiced it. And I believe that there's a culling of the people in America going on right now, and black and brown people are disproportionately affected.
You know, the funny,
It's not like it hasn't happened before.
Yeah, sorry, Dee. The funny thing is that people keep telling us that we're just going on about this all the time. And, you know, when we're individually talking to, you know, people who are not of color, for example, they just think that we're whining again and we're bringing up all of these complaints. But when you hear somebody of Scott's stature saying that they recognize, acknowledge, they see this as a reality, you know, it doesn't authenticate because we already know it's real. It happens to us. We're living this daily. But 27,000, over 27,000 individuals killed by cops since the year 2000. Now, I'm not sure if you can put all the wars that's taken place in Afghanistan, in Iran, in Syria, and in Chechnya, and Yugoslavia, and all of these places. I'm not sure you can put all the bodies together amassed in those wars, and they will amount to the amount that law enforcement have killed on the streets of the United States of America.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure. I would like to work out find out what those stats were. But over 27,000.
Definitely surpasses the victims of 9/11. That's hands down.
But surely, if you was sitting somewhere as the president or the guy that was in charge of, you know, providing the president with the information of the law statistics, crime reduction, etc., and all of that stuff, would you not be looking at that and saying there's something wrong here? There's something terribly wrong here. 27,000 of our people?
If I were in charge, no one's asking me to be in charge, but if you made me pres or if you made me governor or prime minister, one of the first places I would go is law enforcement. And I would say, the last thing you do is pull that weapon out. If you as an officer don't talk first, if you don't use your baton, if you don't use your taser, if you don't use your pepper spray before you use your gun, you're going to prison. That would be just a basic rule. Item 1, 2, 3, 4. Last thing is the gun. And that is not the rule, Kervin. It's the opposite in this country. It's to shoot first and ask questions later. And what's more offensive is what I said earlier. It's a system, the way I see it, and I've learned now, I've spent 31 months studying it, that the officers, frankly, one of their jobs, unwritten, unspoken, is to keep poor people, people of color, homeless people, mentally ill people in their place. And if you have to use the gun, we'll back you up with qualified immunity. And that's sickening, but I think that's the case. That's my observation.
Yolanda's just saying that looking at the interview with the store manager, he said nothing was going on. Alton didn't even know why the police was there. So if Alton didn't know why the police was there, if a gun had been being waved by anybody around the shop, it wasn't there and it wasn't him. So let's just go back to that approach again. I can't help. You see, D, you're right. And that's the reason why I stopped and I've gone back to this beginning. Because for me, right, the whole reason why Alton Sterling lays dead and his family are still mourning is the way the police approached the entire situation. There was never going to be another outcome because of that mentality and the attitude of the approach in the first place.
He was viewed as an immediate threat. And it goes back to one of the first shows that we were involved in, is When They See Us. What is that?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. What is that all about?
You know what?
It's
not even about him being
an immediate threat.
That was a convenient excuse to do what they wanted to do. It's not about being threatened. That's bullshit. These officers come out with their, I'm not even going to say that, but they come out with their ass on their shoulders thinking that they the toughest thing happening, and because they know they got all these excuses that they can use to fall back on when something goes sideways. But the intention was already there. Alton was never a threat to them. Remember, the cop bum rushed him. Alton didn't give him any guff. He just said, what's going on? Why y'all talking to me? And even the store owner said nothing had happened out there. Nothing was going on. And if you look at the first video when the cops walk up, one young lady is talking to Alton. The other one is taking a CD from him and starting to write something on it when the cops approach. So if somebody had been out there waving a gun, he wouldn't have any customers. The store wouldn't have had any customers.
Correct.
Absolutely correct.
He's threatening.
But this is absolutely identical to John Crawford III's situation at the Walmart, where the guy was swatting, where that was a SWAT call, and I don't know how many of you ever saw the two corresponding videos. The one with the 911 call, where they line it up alongside the internal CCTV footage of the store, where they've got the guy standing there on the phone while John Crawford is actually in the store, and then you've got this guy, who's on the phone, who's talking about there's a guy in the store waving a gun around, and the camera's showing you John Crawford's on his phone. He's standing in the aisle on his phone. Now, he found a BB gun on the shelf while he was walking. It had been taken out of his packet, right? And obviously, I don't know. We don't know. But in my mindset, if I'm a responsible shopper, and for the entire time he was in the store, by the way, he was on the phone to his girlfriend. His father was on his way to the house where his girlfriend was, right? So he wasn't out to go and do any And by the way, his father's a corrections officer, right? So his father is a man of stature. So he's on the phone the entire time, talking to his girlfriend on the phone. And he's walking down the aisle, he's got, he's looking for stuff, and he sees a BB gun, not in its packet, sitting on a shelf. I don't know, tins of baked beans, saltfish, corned beef, whatever it was. I don't know what was on the shelf. But he sees the gun. In his mindset, he says, oh, well, I'll pick that up because that just shouldn't be there. I'll hand it in as I'm going round. But he doesn't move because he's still standing there and he's not actually doing anything. He's just on the phone talking to his girlfriend this entire time. Then the guy who's on the SWAT call says, oh my God, he's just pointed a gun at a child, a woman with a child who's got... And he makes it sound like a woman and a child goes down the aisle past John Crawford and John Crawford has waved the gun at the child. When the video footage shows you the woman and the child go nowhere near John Crawford, they come across the top of the aisle that John Crawford was half the way down and they've gone across to another aisle. At the same time he's saying, oh, he's pointing a gun at the child. But here's my problem.
And don't forget that he lied and said that he saw him loading the gun.
Yeah, but let's just...
I know for parents. I mean, it's so much stuff that this guy did, and all that Walmart did was move him and his girlfriend down to Florida to work down there. No repercussions for what you did, and the 2 lives, remember, 2 lives that you caused to be taken that day.
Yeah.
Because a woman died from panicking.
Yes,
she had a
that's
heart
right.
attack.
Exactly.
Died.
2 people's lives were lost that day. But here's my argument. Law enforcement officers have got a 911 call of a man randomly waving a gun in a store in a threatening manner, right? So law enforcement turns up, and I've done the show. I've had John Crawford's father on this show several years ago, and I remember the story. It's one of those stories that have stuck in the back of my mind forever. And the law enforcement arrives at the store, and when they arrive, there's no sign of this panic you'd expect to see if somebody was in the middle of a store waving a gun. There's nobody running out with their arms up, throwing their shopping in the air, going, ah! Right? But they make no approach to speak to any members of staff, the manager, the guy on the till, somebody's stacking the shelves on the lane somewhere. They make no attempt to find out if there's any truth in the allegation of somebody waving a gun in the store. They go in there, and within 3.5 seconds, John Crawford lay dead on the ground. Still on the phone to his girlfriend. In fact, his father gets to hear his last breath. His father walks in to the house while the girlfriend is on the phone, still talking to John as John hits the ground, and hears his son pass his last breath. Now, there's nothing dissimilar between what happened to John Crawford and what happened to Alton Sterling. You've got officers that have been called to the scene of an area where there is a claim that somebody's waving a gun, and within seconds, a man of color lays dead on the ground. Now, Dee was right. Alton Sterling was dead from the time they arrived because they had nothing else on their mind. And the question we've got to start asking ourselves is not whether they're armed or not, is what caliber of man are law enforcement recruiting that they don't have the basic common sense to arrive at a scene and look at it and do a quick risk assessment. What's going on here, guys? Right, quickly. You scan the area. Nobody's waving a gun. Nobody's fighting. You don't even have to take your gun out of your holster at this point. There's no imminent threat. There's nothing taking place. So I'm struggling to understand the standard of officers that are being recruited, because it appears that they come looking for trouble. They come looking for trouble. And it's almost like a bully boy tactic. I'm an officer. I got a uniform. I got the badge. I got the gun. You do as I say. Doesn't matter what you think. Doesn't matter who you think you are. I'm the man. Do as I say,
right,
or else.
Right. And also, Kervin, we have to look at it, if you remember, the aftermath of that John Crawford killing, very much like Alton Sterling, where they immediately set out to vilify John Crawford. I remember seeing a video between the police and Crawford's girlfriend where they were trying to get her or coerce her into saying that they were doing some type of shoplifting or some type of crime or something. It turned out to be absolutely nothing. Same with Alton Sterling. You know, immediately it came out that this was a bad person. That's what we read in the press. Yeah. He had these priors and he had these other experiences with law enforcement. I mean, and we can go down the line. We can go down through each of us, through Yolanda McNair and Adesha, Scott and Tyler, Andre Gladden, Dee with Andre Gladden, me with Taylor, where they immediately, these good people, their first reaction is not to come to the family. It's not to come to the public and say, we messed up, we're sorry, and none of that. When they come out, they try to vilify and muddy up our loved ones. And that's what they did to John Crawford, what they've done to Alton Sterling, and what I would say that they've done to every one of the loved ones that are on the loved ones of the panel members here today. It's what they do. And here's the thing about it. Then they get away with it. And so like Dee so accurately said, Alton they had made that decision before they got out the car, what was going down here. And then even when they are found guilty, they're able to just go to another police department. It is really what people need to realize, and then I'll be quiet and listen. But what people need to realize is that as the public's mistrust and distrust of the police department grows, when that reaches a certain point, that is going to lead to a breakdown, an overall breakdown in society, is what I believe. When people no longer have any regard for police, when they no longer respect these people or the jobs that they're doing, I can see some very dark days ahead in America if this continues. And we have no reason to think that it won't continue.
Very, very true. You know, thank you very much for that commentary, Patrick. And it really does sadden our heart when we put all of this stuff together, and we see just how reckless they are, and the lack of the sheer disregard they have for human life and respect that they have for people of color in general. That John Crawford, Andre Gladden, you know. Here's the thing. We know out of that 27,000 people that have been killed by cops, we know that there's some white folk in there too. Latinos, you have some, some Native Americans in there as well. And, there's good percentages of them, but the stats still show 75% of them are people of color. That's still an exaggerated high, when people of color are not the most prominent race in the country. So that gives you something to go figure out.
Well, when we're talking about people, when we're talking about black people, we're roughly 12 to 13% of the population. When we're talking about black men, cut that in half. We're 6%. So you have 6% of the population that is being
75% of the
killing.
killing. Now that's a huge imbalance. Right. So here we are. I think, in my opinion, I think everything else that took place that day is irrelevant. The approach, the attitude, the mentality of the law enforcement officers that arrived on the scene determined that Alton Sterling would die that day. Now, we're running out of time, and I don't want to waste no time because we've got some other stuff that we want to come into. The video. Not the first video, Scott. Let's bring in Scott, shall we? So we've all had a chance to review the video of what took place, the additional video. We've all had chance to review the press conference that was given by the attorneys with the new information and evidence that was provided, not by them, but by the FBI and the police authorities themselves on their own investigation. And it says, that, TJ, mute your mic. It says that the officer walked up, put a gun to Alton's head, swore at him and told him he was going to kill him. That was before any attempt to detain him. Now, that's not what we're saying. That's not what his family are saying. That's what the police are saying. Run us through it, Scott. Hi, Scott. Are you muted? Everybody's muted. Anybody coming in? Or is it just me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. Fine.
Hi. Can you,
okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you've all just unmuted your mics now.
Yeah, something, there was a little tone from Skype, and then it went to mute. And anyway, I'm listening. I could hear you.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
Basically, I wasn't speaking. I was just listening and getting, I'm getting wistful. I'm getting, again, I'm getting that overwhelming feeling of, beating my head against the wall. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep beating my head against the wall, as all of us are. But the overarching feeling I see from the way these officers approached a suspect. I don't see him as being black or white. It's officers, let me call them peace officers, crime fighters, sworn to protect and serve. They're just responding to a call. They're doing their job. They're responding to a call. That's what we would want them to do. Now, from there, though, you guys all know how it went wrong and what happened. And that is my calling, is how we change through our forum and hopefully people on social media. And, we're all sharing our broadcasts and telling people to listen. And we're getting positive feedback. I know I am, from people that listen to our podcast. Kervin, that's you. You're the catalyst. But if we don't do this, we don't get the word out, then nothing will be done, and shame on us. So I do want to piggyback on something Patrick said that is what I say is a fact. It's an undisputed fact, is that if law enforcement officials and politicians across this country don't start changing the culture of law enforcement training and use of force, there will be a pushback. And I'm measuring my words very carefully at this point. I am measuring my words. You all know what I'm saying. I just don't want to be on record of saying it. But there will be a major pushback if our politicians don't change the culture of law enforcement. And let me add to that, the change will improve the lives of everybody. It will decrease crime. If officers are trained to communicate de-escalate and negotiate and not use lethal force. That will increase the safety of all of us, will increase our opinion of law enforcement, will improve it, and get us where we want to go. And I don't think it's that hard for these intelligent people, politicians, law enforcement people, to see what I'm saying, but they're not doing it. They're just not implementing what we are saying. And that is the mystery to me. And that's why I fall back to, they don't want to, Kervin. They don't want the police unions on their back. They don't want the pro-police people in this country, the haters in this country. It's sad, but I believe there are millions of people that want to keep poor people, people of color, people who are mentally ill in their place.
Yeah.
And when they get out of place, they're going to get a bullet. They are not going to get treatment. They're not going to get a fair shake in the courts. They're going to get lethal force. And that's what I see. And I think that's an undisputed fact.
Yeah. Agreed, Scott. Thank you very much for that observation. Let me just move over to Yolanda very quickly. Yolanda, what stood out for you most in the attorney's press conference that was held with the family, with the new information that was divulged as to the law enforcement's investigation findings of what Soleimani did or didn't do?
The fact that they said that they weren't surprised by the outcome, that was expected. We know that police investigating police officers' actions is never going to result in truth or justice. And the fact that the blatant disregard for Alton's life, his family, the whole thing, as far as how they handled it and how the so-called authority proceeded with their investigation that shouldn't take 4 freaking years, was just a pony show for the most part. You know, the investigation done by the FBI and splicing together all the video and showing the 71 seconds, and even coming up with that conclusion that it was only 71 seconds between initiation and death, that's very disturbing to me. And
it's called I'm interrupting you, but it's called a publicity stunt. A publicity stunt is what it is.
Yeah, you know, it was just a dog and pony show for the police department to get themselves out of a sticky situation. And as Scott has said, you know, I'll say it, we're 2 seconds away from the Wild Wild West. And unfortunately, I think it's going to end up there, and that's the only thing that's going to push for change. You know, we keep trying to have a conversation with them, but the fact of the matter is they're not trying to hear us. So it doesn't make a difference how many times we try to initiate the conversation. They are not going to listen. That doesn't mean we give up. We have to get to the people who are misunderstanding what they're getting and not understanding that they're purposely fed misinformation. We need to open those people's eyes.
Yes. Need to try.
We can't afford to give in. We can't afford to give up. We can't afford, because our very lives depend upon us fighting for what is right. If we don't fight for what is right, we may as well all go and line up against the wall and ask somebody to shoot us now.
It's true. It's true.
So here's the thing.
True.
When you look at the wealth of information that has supported the Sterling family's fight for justice, when you understand, and let's just go back and look at this again, because I think this is very important. We are sorry, Baton Rouge. I want to apologize to the family. We're sorry because we should have never hired That was just in two sentences. We are sorry. And then there's apologize in the very first sentence and apologize in the third paragraph as well. So in 3 paragraphs, the opening 3 paragraphs, there are 3 sorries and 2 apologies. And that is the police chief, Murphy Paul, talking about I sincerely apologize for the actions of the past and the role that our profession has played in building barriers in communities of color. That's an acknowledgement, that's an acceptance that the way that they've policed that community, it has caused problems with people of color. That's been recognized right there, right? But you've got to understand when they talk about he was fired by the police department and he was reinstated, so to speak, or allowed, or it was retracted by the Civil Service Board. Now, I don't know much about your Civil Service Board out in the United States of America, but our Civil Service Board over here in the UK would be like the Police Complaints Commission or something, and there is nobody from law enforcement or the police department involved in that panel, which is where every primary investigation of any officer first goes. Now, it's been said that the law enforcement of the United States of America was built on the foundation of what Robert Constable had accomplished here in the United Kingdom, which was the Metropolitan Police. What I don't understand is why law enforcement in America, and I think here's where the problem starts. It starts with the title, because enforcement represents something confrontational. Enforcement is almost something that's done against someone's will. The word itself speaks of something aggressively confrontational. So maybe that's where we start. We start by changing the name. I don't know. But there's one point. Secondly, we've talked about, well, I think it was when Maria Kofinko was here, and she was talking about how long it took her to get a hairdresser's license. I think it was 12 months or something like that. She had to get a hairdresser's license, and it's like 6 weeks training in the police to be able to come out with your badge and a gun and have the right to kill, take another human being's life. Here in the UK, we do things a little differently. I'm not trying to say we're perfect, far from it. We've got some holes of our own, gaping ones. Racism, institutionalized racism, is still rife in many areas. Meghan Markle has just run out of the UK and headed for Canada for the very same reasons. We've still not got our backyard sorted yet. But there are some things that we do that you can learn from. We don't have a regular armed police force. We have what's referred to as a armed response unit. An armed response unit are a unit that is ready to go the moment there is a call that firearms or terrorism is involved. And they are located at Scotland Yard or wherever it is that their bases are. They're probably spread out in one or two different areas, and they may well be in certain high-profile stations that are affiliated with the City of London, where the risk is high. You'll find individual officers in there that have the training to carry a gun. But you're not going to find officers in every station carrying a gun. Most of the stations, they don't have guns. They have their batons, they have their handcuffs, and they have the gift of communication that allows them to speak before they act. And I think that's something that America could learn from the get-go. I don't know. I'm going to put that one out there. Maybe you can answer, Scott. How do you feel?
Well, I think that a nationwide, I think I made this appointment or this point before, and I'm going to throw it out again, is that there's inconsistencies in training policies and use of force throughout the country. And I've made this comment before, but it still dumbfounds me or gobsmacks me, as you would say, that in California, the largest population in the United States, there are 500 different police agencies. And a police agency is something like the Los Angeles Police Department, the San Francisco Sheriff's Department, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. These are all different agencies, the California Highway Patrol. They each get to set their own use of force policies. So from the get-go, Kervin, that's just in California. 500 departments can set their own policies. And some of them, for example, getting back to the Vincent Valenzuela case, which we talked about with Marico Finco, which is still going, the federal case, chokeholds were involved in killing Vincent Valenzuela. 2 officers in a sweaty, kind of a grappling, wrestling, couldn't get a proper chokehold on Vincent, and he was choked to death. Choked to death. And those officers were, for example, allowed to apply a chokehold in Anaheim, California, which is where Disneyland is. And yet the Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, the number 2 department in the country, have outlawed chokeholds, Kervin. An LAPD officer, and there's 6,000 or 7,000 of them, are not allowed to do chokeholds. But Anaheim PD, which is right next to LA, they allow their officers to do chokeholds. So there's inconsistency, and that has to end. So right from the beginning, it sounds like UK, again, we got our system from your system. But what's happened here is our Wild West culture of, gun-toting cowboys has taken over law enforcement in this country. Instead of de-escalation, it's shooting first.
Yeah.
And that is just accelerated by 500 agencies just in California, and then same in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or Dallas, Texas, or New York, or Vermont. Every agency sets their own use of force. That's got to end. There has to be one standardized use of force, what I would call continuum, in the United States. And it starts with, similar to your system. You've got officers who come out and kind of assess the scene first. And then if they need guns, then they've, got backups ready to go. If they need mental health professionals, they got mental health professionals that can come in. And that kind of continuum of force would show the public that crime fighting is allowed. No one's pro-crime. We're not pro-crime. We're pro-crime fighting done in the right way, in a correct way that respects civil rights and human rights. And that ain't happening in the United States. And it's doing, UK seems to be doing a better job. So we need to take the best that we can from the UK and implement it. And I don't think it's that hard. I just don't think it's that hard for these different agencies in the United States, and there's thousands of them, to have a continuum of force that's standard. So if you get pulled over in Miami, Florida, when you're at the beach by a cop, you know what's going to happen, just like you were if you're in Portland, Oregon, across the country. If you get pulled over by a cop, you know the continuum of force, and it's taught with your driver's license. It's taught in schools, and everybody knows the rules across the country. And they're taught in the police academies and the sheriff's academies and the highway patrol academies, so that we all are, on the same field, the law enforcement, the civilians, the justice system. And it's broken. Our system is broken. Then, of course, the other issues of racism and intolerance, they all get played into it. But if you start with a legally binding continuum of force across the country that has to be adopted by every department, that would be my recommendation. So make me president and I'll do it.
Wow, you got my vote, Scott. Let me just throw something to you. And maybe Patrick, maybe you can answer this one for us, Patrick. You've got all of these indifferent standards set state by state. No, you haven't got a nationwide template, which means that every time you have another issue, a new precedent can be set, because somebody will turn around and say, well, in the case of so-and-so in Philadelphia, this is how they reacted and this was their ruling. So going by that standard, this is okay. And the guy says, oh, okay, I don't really agree with it, but I can see where you're going with that. Okay, so your complaint is upheld or whatever. Then there's another issue which is even far worse than that. And then they're saying, based on the fact that that was the precedent, but then because somebody else did it different somewhere else, you said that the difference is understandable, and so therefore you move the goalpost again. So there's no real precedent set here, so us doing this ain't that bad, because you allowed that one to upgrade. And the guy says, well, okay, well, yeah, you got an argument here. Yeah, they did change the ruling because of the last one. And state to state, it just appears to be people seeing just how out there they can get away with stuff. Because when you look at policing shouldn't be a local preference, someone's new project. It's something that's part of the institution, the infrastructure of who we are and what we do. Law enforcement is like the government and church. It should all be almost a fixated, yes, slightly flexible, but understanding of who we are and what we represent. And until you start having laws that are governed nationwide, that everybody has got to stick to, you're always going to have somebody pulling out a book. We don't have these books over here in this country, like you guys have. A new law being created each and every week because somebody else has passed a new law down south somewhere and they've been able to get away with it, so we should be able to get away with it too. The law's the law. And if those in power, have agreed that that's right and that's wrong and that should be the consequence if it's wrong, then that's where we are.
Amen. And I think that's where body-worn cameras come in, because they will force the officers to that continuum of force that I'm talking about and you're alluding to. It will force them to that. Obviously every situation is a little different, but the body-worn cameras, but the officers' actions should be consistent. Now maybe the suspect will be inconsistent because they're mentally impaired, or maybe they've been drinking. My
big problem about the body-worn cameras is that they are managed locally. What should happen?
Another issue.
What should happen is that there should be a sender on the vehicle, a hard drive, whatever it is, going on Wi-Fi that automatically uploads everything that goes through that camera on that system to a central point which is governed and managed by a totally independent body forced to oversee and review every incident that the police have been involved with. So when you and I turn around and say, well, we don't think that guy acted accordingly, it's not his sergeant that's reviewing the footage and making a judgment call. It's somebody as respected for community members, and maybe even on the road, they hold the seat for 12 months. They're even elected almost like a mayoral kind of program. But it's got to be a body. It can't just be one individual, because what you need is a group of people that can come together and make a joint decision. So they can all say, yeah, I can see where you're going with that, right? And you're looking at this video, and this video says the guy turned it off. And for me, the moment a law enforcement officer turns off his camera, he's suspect.
I think that's a great idea. And it's very doable in today's technology.
Absolutely. We got satellites up in space that are taking out ISIS terrorists, right, in the middle of Turkey and Afghanistan.
Right.
Well, that's another thing. Even drones, hell, they could have sent a drone over to the Triple S market.
So on every vehicle that's dispatched, you've got some sort of a hard drive sender that's connected to your cam, and that automatically sends. You know, you can do it on your phone. You just send it to your WhatsApp, or you send it to whatever. But this will automatically send it, upload it, automatically, not dependent on you. So it's not a case of you wait until you've done your investigation and I'll send it later. It automatically sends the images to some sort of center point database, right, where it can be reviewed. So every time there is a killing, it's not even a case of somebody's got to put in a complaint. I think every time there's a killing, there's a review. You review that just to make sure that it's okay. And that officer needs to be stood down without his weapon until that okay is given.
In America, Kervin, I've been hearing about these civilian review boards, which I am strongly in support of for 6 years now. This is the one thing. In fact, the civilian review board is the thing that the police are most resistant to, more resistant to than having body cameras on. Yeah, we have the technology to where when a policeman radios in a stop, dispatch could then begin an automatic feed of what's going on that stop. We have the technology to do this, but we don't have the will to do it because they don't. And really, the least that we should have, the very least, is a civilian review board that will independently review each altercation that comes into question. But what we see is exactly what Scott and Yolanda are talking about, is we have police departments that operate from county to county under a completely different set of standards. There's no, they have no one that oversees. They operate with complete autonomy. They get to control the video data. So while I'm in favor of video cameras, I now see that video cameras without a civilian review board those benefits are going to be minimal at best. A civilian review board is what people need and is what is needed to bring these departments back into alignment. And until we have that, I don't think that things are going to change. When police are still get to hold all the cards, they get to review these video and audio for months before they're able to go in and amend their statements over and over. We don't get that. We don't get that opportunity to do that. But they're able to sit on this, and then they're able to craft, and this is really where we need to get into. And then they begin to, and because they become experts at it, crafting the narrative. And so now you have all of these good people, Tyler Rushing, Taylor Rock, Daisha Miller, and the list goes on, of good people, of good Americans who have now been vilified because of the law enforcement's crafting of the narrative that surrounded their killing. We need a civilian review board. We needed it yesterday. But this is the one thing that police departments across the country are most resistant. They don't want that evidence out of their hands.
We have here in the UK, we have the Police Complaints Commission. And the Police Complaints Commissions, right, are headed up by civilians, individuals, civil servants, people who work. They're not cops. They don't work in the justice system. These are civilians. And every shooting, not just every killing, every time an officer fires his weapon, there is a review of the entire incident and procedure to justify whether or not that action that was taken was necessary, needed, warranted, and authorized. Then you start looking and investigating in whether it was done in the right manner. Now, a police complaints commission, a review body, somebody that's responsible for reviewing the body cam footage, etc., and determining whether this was a good shoot or not, right, needs to be independent of your law enforcement office. The biggest problem you've got in America is everything seems to be governed by the DUJ. And until we can get that separated, the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, until we can get them more accountable, we're never going to get authenticity or accountability or transparency. There needs to be some real change in the heart of the government in the United States of America so that these things will change.
And not only that, Kervin, but until we have more accountability, we're going to continue seeing police forces being the breeding grounds of sociopaths. This is where we're going to keep getting the worst of the worst until we become accountable, right? I mean, if you know that you can do anything and get away with it, why not do it, right? And until we get that type of jurisdiction, we're going to keep getting these officers that should not in no way be officers.
And again, when we were talking about the way that Salamoni, and how Salamoni in particular, arrived, his mindset, his conduct, the way that he approached Alton, the way that Andre Gladden was approached, the way that Tyler Russian was approached, the way that numerous amount of people, John Crawford, you name them, right? The way that these people have been approached when law enforcement officers arrive on the scene determine that there's only going to be one outcome. It determines that there's only going to be one outcome. So when you start looking at that mentality, you're then asking yourself, what kind of caliber of individuals are they recruiting? And remember, I think we said this last week, and I mentioned this last week, right? When we see people getting away with murder, does it not invite the wrong caliber of person to apply? Because is that not the reason why we have a police force that is now, or a law enforcement agency that is now full of KKK and all sorts of extremist groups? Is it not because...
Well,
That's absolutely why.
We had a police officer, and this is a story that's making the rounds now. With that police officer that you guys remember that made the dog crap sandwich and fed it to the homeless person.
Yeah.
Lost their job, and then his union got busy and they got his job back for him. These are the types of people that we are attracting to the force that would do something as heinous and as grotesque as making a dog crap sandwich and feeding it to somebody. this is ridiculous. And each case that we see this type of gross irresponsibility, and they get away with it. This police officer fed someone a crab sandwich and got his job back.
Just as the police officer pounded Kelly Thomas to death.
For bad behavior.
And so when we have officers who are able to get away with exercising their hatred, then we've got a hotbed of recruitment of people who see joining the police or the law enforcement as a way of them being able to execute their hatred in a professional way without consequence.
Absolutely.
We've got 5 minutes left, guys. Just want to thank Yolanda, Scott, Dee, and Patrick. We're hoping that Stephanie and TJ in particular gets well very soon. We've had a whole host of comments, and one of them that I wanted to read is gone. But Paula Arietta, I saw your comments. They were absolutely spot on and superb. It's actually gone off my news feed now, so I can't even read it. Next week, we've got Deborah Sanchez, whose daughter, Jordan Sims, from Safford, Arizona. She was killed. We're going to be covering that story next week. But before we go, let's hand over to Mama Bear, Yolanda, in rounding up on behalf of Veda, Washington, Alton Sterling and their family, and those that are probably tuning in, especially who don't understand that Veda couldn't make it because of technical problems that was beyond her control that we tried to get resolved before the show started. But we as a body decided to go ahead and try and unravel this as best we can. We hope that we've done it justice. We hope that we've done Alton justice. We hope that we've done the family justice in our presentation of the evidence as we have observed them. And more importantly, we trust that you guys have really been educated and informed on this particular show, which was an Alton Sterling story, and the theme obviously was when killing appears to be the only option. Yolanda.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you, because I know Veda personally, that she wants everybody to keep fighting, not just for yours, but for everybody's. That's my desire as well. Don't get so focused on, we have to look at the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And
I suppose what you're trying to say, Yolanda, is don't just get so focused on your own thing that you forget about what everybody else is going through.
But I don't want to sound cruel in saying that, because everybody needs to focus on this. But you have to also look at the bigger picture, and the things and the strides that you make them for everybody.
Yeah.
So I'll say this real quick. In Detroit, they have a system called the green light system, where there's a bay of cameras on stores and gas stations and other places. The owners opt in, and the police monitor them. Good thing about it, even though they're monitoring for criminal activity by individuals and civilians, they have also caught police officers in the wrong. And that's been a double-edged sword for them. But the body cams are failing. I'm gonna just be honest. Yeah. They are there to supposedly help officers stay in line, but as long as there's no real consequences or repercussions for their actions, it doesn't make a difference, as you have seen. Yeah. There were multiple cameras on when Alton was killed. The officer didn't give a damn what he said, how he said it, or what he did, because they weren't going to do anything to him anyway.
He knew he was going to get away with it anyway.
Right. So we need to do our part and put the pressure on the police chiefs, on the prosecutors, on the people that are making the laws and changing the laws. We can affect change, but sitting on our behinds and talking about it all the time is not the way to do it. You actually have to take some action, whether it's making calls, sending in letters, doing, do something. If it's nothing but you call that office every day and tell them one person's name.
Yeah.
keep doing it. It'll get enough on their nerves, and they'll be like, well, do something.
Okay, we're right out of time. I just want to thank all of you guys for joining us. Again, thank you, Yolanda. Thank you, D. Martin, Patrick Lane, Scott Russian. Sorry that Stephanie couldn't stay on the show. She wasn't feeling too well. And TJ, our beloved producer, thank you very much for all the work you do behind the scenes. Get well soon. Sorry that Veda couldn't make it either. We pray that we'll be in touch with you again and maybe get an update on this continued battle for the justice for Alton Sterling, and a battle for that the family are going through in order to win that fight. 11 children. Wow. We just want to thank all of our listeners who stayed with us, tuned in, and follow us and support us week in and week out from all parts of the world, in all different countries. My name is Kervin Julien. This was Issues Today, the Alton Sterling story, when killing appears to be the only option. We're out of here.